Good evening, councillors and those in the gallery, and welcome to this Ordinary Council meeting. Declare this meeting open on 13th March 2024 at 6 p.m. I'd like to acknowledge the City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and their descendants. Disclaimer, the terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted on the door as you enter, so please ensure that you've read them prior to attending this meeting and abide by them. Attendance and apologies. We have all councillors present tonight. Councillor Brodovnik is online electronically attending, and we have no other apologies. We have no leave of absences, nil apologies, and declarations of financial proximity interest and interest affecting impartiality is Mr Stephen Kane, the CEO, who declared an impartiality interest in item 14.1.2, Independent Member Audit Committee, remuneration as he has previously worked with Mr Draper in the Australian Army. Are there any other declarations of interest? If so, just fill out that form under your desk in the drawer and just please pass them up to the CEO. Part 5, public question time. Questions and answers recorded in the minutes of the meeting may be summarised in accordance with the Local Government Administration Regulations of 1996, and all questions received for this meeting have been answered and have been included in this schedule. All questions will be published in the minutes of this meeting. 5.1, answers to questions which were taken on notice. We have nil, and 5.2, questions relating to reports contained in the agenda. 5.2.1 were questions of which due notice has been given. One person has asked questions of which are answered below and will be published in the minutes. And that was Mr Simon Ashby, so you have those responses. 5.2.2, questions without due notice. The following people have registered to ask questions, and the first is Ms Marilena Stimpfel. Thank you, Marilena.
You're welcome. Oh, okay. So I have 3 questions. Can I ask them all? Mm-hmm. Yay. So the first one goes this way. This is in regards to the motion 14.11.17, which was raised by me at the annual elector meetings in regards to changing the boundaries of City of Swan and entering in discussion with the City of Bassendean. So the question is, have there been instances in the recent past, like we say, 10 to 15 years back, where a change in boundary with neighbouring LGA has occurred? And if yes, when and what was changed, and how was that change initiated?
Thank you. Through you, Mr CEO.
Thank you. Thank you, Marilena. So the process for initiated change is undertaken through the Local Government Advisory Board. They publish an annual report each year that deals with any proposed changes or any changes they dealt with. In terms of the timeframe you've referred to, if you write to the Local Government Advisory Board, they'll be able to provide you details of everything over that decade.
Yeah, so I'm aware of at least of one, which I'd like to mention for the new councillors, is that the City of Noranda switched from City of Swan to, was it Bassendean in 2016, or Bayswater, thank you. So there have been things that happened in the recent past. So the other one is staff, Madam Mayor and Mr. CEO aware that the City of Bassendean has had a massive change of heart regarding getting into discussion with the City of Swan to talk about the change in the boundaries? Because as of March 11, so Monday, they held a special meeting, and they had a resolution which was passed unanimously, supporting collaborative dialogue with the City of Swan. So I think there is a strong appetite in discussing the boundary change, in contradiction to what was discussed at the Agenda Forum, when you had that information last week, where people said that the City of Bassendean wasn't interested in entering discussion.
Would you like us to respond to that question?
Are you aware that they changed their minds?
Yes.
Excellent. This one is a bit long, and it speaks to a comment that Mr. CEO made in regards to the lack of community support for entering in discussion with the City of Bassendean regarding the changes of the LGA boundaries. Mr. CEO, you stated that staff showed you copies of social media posts showing no strong desire for a boundary change, and that no letters were received by the City of Swan indicating that the community wants this change and is aligned with the motion that I raised. And I paraphrase, but that was the gist of what you indicated last week. So my question is the following one. Is Facebook now an official channel that will influence staff recommendation to council? Because if that is the case, I can point you to a couple of sites where the will of a community on controversial item was very clear, but we were not heard, and the staff kept on, acting against our recommendations. So has this changed now? Can we just express our views on Facebook and you guys will take it into account as an official statement of community views?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you. And thank you, Marilena. You'd be aware that Facebook and other social media, such as Twitter, are communication channels which people express their personal views on. Those views represent the individual's views, not necessarily a wide spectrum, but the individual's views. So there'll always be opportunity to use those channels. As I said last week, the city had not received any proposal from a community member in regard to anything to do with a boundary adjustment, but people other than with the motion that was moved at the annual electors meeting.
Excellent. So as a community member that has been engaged with this council for the last 2 years on several items, I can feel that the goalpost keeps on changing. Because when you indicated that there is no direction from the community in forms of letters or whatnot to express our support for this motion, I can point to many, many other situations where hundreds of emails have been sent.
Yeah, just need to make sure we keep this on track.
Yeah, I
as
will.
being a question.
No, the question is when enough is enough. How many letters do you need or emails do you need for staff to take the community view into consideration?
Through you, Mr. CEO.
So you'd be aware through the Local Government Act, there is a avenue for the community if it wished to, in order to move a proposal to deal with boundary adjustment. It requires 250 signatures of the affected electors. But as said, at that stage, the people moving would have to include a proposal that outlined the impact on the residents. For instance, the city of Bassendean, town of Bassendean's rates for its residential customers are 17% higher for residents and 25% higher for pensioners. That information would need to be included in the presentation. So all the aspects to do with the impact on infrastructure, the impact on community service, etc., would need to be included. It's not simply a case of just raising a petition and saying, there it is, 250 people, we want a proposal. So the Local Government Act is quite clear. The Local Government Advisory Board process is laid out on the website. And if community members are interested, that's where they should start.
Oh, excellent. Can I just ask a couple of clarification points? Very short. So I went and looked at the directions from the board, and it looks like there is a lot of, is the board's job to assess if a change in boundary is viable or not, pending, as you said, the community 250 signature. Did I get that wrong, or is that how it should go?
You've got that partly wrong. So yes, it's the board's job to assess a proposal, but you need to make a proposal. So the proposal needs to deal with all of the matters outlined in them, including the financial impact. So, for instance, financial impact not only of the affected area, but on the unaffected area. For instance, a boundary adjustment involved transition of Midland, Guildford and Woodbridge into the town of Bassendean would require a $100 million investment by the residual residents in City of Swan to replace its administration centre and its operations centre and other critical infrastructure. It would need to include the impact on rates. So the loss of rateable areas, industrial areas that move from one to the area would significantly disproportionately disadvantage those who are left. So it's not simply a case of saying we, the affected residents, want to put down a proposal to change a boundary. You need to address each of the criteria contained in that analysis.
Fair enough. I had another smart question, but I
think this is
forgot,
the
so I'll write it
last
down
one of
for you.
five.
Thank you so much for your answers.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marilena. 5.3, any other questions? Other than those that haven't already had a chance to have their questions answered, is there any member of the public wishing to ask a question on an item in the agenda? No. 5.3, other questions not relating to items contained in the agenda. If there's anyone in the gallery who would like to ask a question. 5.3.1, questions of which due notice have been given was nil. 5.3.2, questions without due notice. There have been no questions without due notice received at this point. I can ask, other than those that have already had their questions answered, is there any member of the public wishing to ask a question on an item not on the agenda? No? I might just see Councillor Weil, if you could just turn that microphone off, thank you. And that brings us to public statement time. So registration for public statement time at council meetings was required by 6 p.m. on Tuesday the 13th of February 2024, and there have been no requests for anyone to make a public statement at this stage. And that brings us to 7, petitions. All petitions were to be presented to council at the agenda forum last Wednesday evening. The following petition was presented to the agenda forum on 6th of March 2024 that requires to be tabled tonight. And Ms Lynn Deering, on behalf of John and Wendy Farron, to retain Riverside Gardens All Abilities Playground, presented a petition containing 72 names at the agenda forum on the 6th of March 2024 to be tabled at this meeting. And this is one I have in my hand, which I'll hand to the CEO. Down there. And the recommendation was, 1, that the petition be referred to the CEO for consideration and response. And I'll ask for a mover, Deputy Mayor, and a seconder, Councillor Jones. Thank you very much. Is there anyone against? Right, that's carried. And that moves us on to deputations for tonight. All deputations for items on the agenda were heard at the agenda forum held on the 6th of March 2024. I do have some pretty exciting announcements tonight. Just would like to share and make a really special announcement regarding one of the City of Swans residents, Diane Ryder. Some of you might know Diane in the community. She was inducted in WA Women's Hall of Fame on March the 8th, 2024. So that's really a fantastic achievement for Di. Diane has made committed contributions to the community through her advocacy for Aboriginal veterans, families and children. And after retiring from the Australian Army, she continued to volunteer at various health, education and cultural programs with the selfless goal to make a positive impact on others' lives. Diane's accomplishments include the Order of Australia Medal, OAM, in 2023 and the National NAIDOC Lifetime Achievement Award in 2017. That was the nomination for Australian of the Year in 2015. She was awarded Perth NAIDOC Outstanding Achievement and the City of Swan Active Citizen Awards in 2009. She currently runs the Indigenous Veterans Service and the Swan Aboriginal Community Christmas celebration held in Guildford. And we'd also like to thank Diane for her dedication to helping those in our community and congratulate her on this well-deserved acknowledgement. I think we can give her a round of applause as well. That's lovely. Thank you very much. But also, last week, on March the 8th, the City received an award from Public Works Engineering Australasia, WA, for recognising the City's Stock Road Extension project. This is one of our biggest projects at $71 million. In terms of cost and construction, like I said, one of the biggest and most exciting. It would have been a major undertaking for any local government. This is the award that was presented to our staff on Thursday night last week. This project created that 4.3 kilometre connection between Great Northern Highway and Tonkin Highway. And that featured, obviously, the bridge over Ellenbrook, which we're all aware of, for those of you that aren't, a rail crossing with boom gates, 5 T intersections and a roundabout at Great Northern Highway. The extension creates that much more direct and safer commute for our residents and community by allowing heavy haulage to bypass Bullsbrook town site. This also unlocks significant economic potential, enabling the creation of a new industrial hub in Perth's northeast. But it's a pretty big step for us towards ensuring our local economy continues to thrive, and that's going to create jobs for us in our fast-growing community. So a pretty big step towards, we'd like to really make sure we acknowledge and thank the Australian government, which provided $16.7 million in funding to make that project a reality. But I especially would like to make a very special mention and acknowledge John Drake, who was our project manager and the finalist for the Emerging Young Leader. So if we can give him a round of applause as well. Thank you. The Deputy Mayor also has some fantastic achievements to read out and some news that we have for Council.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The City of Swan has recently been re-endorsed and recognised as a Gold Waterwise Council for 2024 through the Joint Department of Water and Environmental Regulation and Water Corporation Initiative, the Waterwise Council Programme. Since the City's first endorsement in 2015, the City of Swan has been recognised as one of the top performing councils in achieving sustainable water management in council operations and in building waterwise communities. This recognition is also supported by the fact that all three of the city's leisure centres are also accredited under the Waterwise Leisure Centre scheme. The Waterwise Council programme aims to build a cooperative working relationship between local governments in Western Australia, Department of Water and Environmental Regulation and Water Corporation by acknowledging councils that are demonstrating leadership in sustainable water management. So well done, City of Swan. And number 4, last but not least, the City of Swan's new website has earned global recognition, winning Kentico's Site of the Year award in the Government and Municipal category, finishing in front of entries from Texas and Ohio in the United States. The new site features a clean and appealing design, intuitive navigation, simpler language, advanced search functionality, enhanced mobile responsiveness, custom filters, and a modernised brand. It sets a new standard for local government websites in Western Australia. The award itself is in transit from the US, so I can't show it to you now. That's all, thank you. Over to you, Madam Mayor.
So congratulations to those recipients and well done to the City of Swan. We're pretty proud to be part of the biggest council, one of the biggest councils in WA, and for that recognition we're pretty grateful. We certainly can.
Thank you. And just through the chair, I'd like to recognise the manager of that our area, Marketing Comms, Alana Josky, who will be leaving us in a week's time to relocate to Melbourne with her husband and family. But she has been a mainstay in that area, has done a power of good, particularly in our area, and under the leadership of Muriel Pickering, who will also be leaving us at the end of next month to take up a role at the City of Melville. The two of them have significantly revamped much of our marketing and our communication, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Number 10, leave of absence. I have a leave form for myself from Wednesday the 27th of March until 2nd of April 2024, which I've given to the CEO. There's also a leave form for Councillor Bowman from the 21st of May 2024 to 25th of May 2024 inclusive. Is there any other elected member that requires a leave of absence? And if there is, could you fill out the form, please, and then hand that back up to the CEO? So then there is also a resolution needed for those. We'll do one at a time, both at a time. So all those in favour? So someone move. Mover, Councillor Miles, and seconded by Councillor Henderson. That's carried. And then we're up to confirmation of minutes. 11.1, confirmation of minutes of ordinary meeting of council held on the 14th of February 2024. The resolution required to confirm the minutes of the 14th of February 2024. Do I have a mover? Councillor Bowman, and a seconder, Councillor Miles. Thank you very much. It's carried. And
Sorry, anyone against?
Is there anyone against?
Carried.
No, it's carried unanimously.
Sorry? Councillor Bowman, Councillor Miles.
And 12, business left over from previous meetings, which was nil. So we move on to part 13, adoption of those recommendations contained in items not withdrawn. So for the benefit of community members observing the meeting, the council uses an en bloc method of decision making. So this means that agenda items where council supports the officer recommendations are not debated separately. One vote is taken on all of the items and the officer recommendation is therefore the decision of council. The following items have not been withdrawn for individual consideration and will be dealt with via the en bloc vote. So therefore, the officer recommendation will be the decision of council. 14.1.2, Independent Member Audit Committee Remuneration. 14.2.3, the Draft Ellenbrook Station Precinct Improvement Scheme number 1. 14.3.3, Proposed Amendment number 222 to Local Planning Scheme number 17. And that is to insert multiple dwellings as an additional use, lot 463, number 108, Swan Street, Guildford, LPS 17-222. 14.5.1, Financial Management Report for the period ended 31st of January 2024. 14.5.2, List of accounts paid January 2024. 14.5.3, which is the change in basis of valuation. And I'll ask for a mover, Councillor Bowman, and a seconder, Councillor Miles. So that's carried unanimously. Oh, was there anyone against? Sorry. No one against? Then that's carried unanimously. And then... It's quite a large agenda tonight, so move on to reports withdrawn for debate or absolute majority vote required. The following reports have been withdrawn for debate in accordance with the Meeting Procedures Local Law 2023, and they will be dealt with by council individually. So we move on to 14.1.1, Annual Meeting of Electors, consideration of motions on page 7. Proposed motion, Councillor Bowman. If you'd like to read out your alternate motion, please, Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I move that Council resolves to 1, note the minutes of the annual meeting of electors held on February the 5th, 2024. 2, note the comments outlined in the report detailing when reports are anticipated to be presented to Council on relevant motions. 3A, request the Mayor and the CEO meet with the Town of Bassendean Mayor and CEO to ascertain position in relation to potential boundary changes. And B, that a further report be provided to Council on the impacts to the city of any changes to the southwestern boundary with the Town of Bassendean. And 4, require the CEO to conduct a council briefing on the current planning delegations to staff, which should include comparison to other Tier 1 local governments and the current limits on deemed to comply or acceptable development criteria delegations.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Zanino? Councillor Bowman, would you like to speak to the motion? Oh, sorry. Your reason for motion first. I was going to go back.
The reason for the motion is community support has been shown and at least a discussion with the Town of Bassendean is warranted, and councillors received numerous emails regarding planning approvals that have been approved by staff under delegation, many of which are deemed to comply with acceptable development criteria, and as such this needs further attention.
Is there anyone against the motion? Councillor Catalano. So Councillor Bowman, if you'd like to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, the report from staff to council provides the comments to each of the motions moved. For the vast majority, staff have provided information that the proposed action is already currently being undertaken or reasons why a further report is not necessary. I would like to see that the relevant staff make contact with each of the electors who moved the motion to provide any further assistance or advice. For example, motion 11 from Mr Philip Woods from the Lockridge Progress Association. Councillors, we all know about the monthly finance report and where to look for the information. Would all be well aware of the major projects page. But if you're not familiar with local government, this is not always easy to find. In this example, I'd like to see staff have taken the time to contact by phone Mr Woods and explain step by step how he can access this information, how to read and understand it. Going on to my 2 slight changes. It was evident that there was a strong theme that came out of the annual electors meeting, and that was the planning decisions, and more particular the planning delegations. Councillors, we are required to review the delegations every year, but the last time this was undertaken was June 23. What would be the impacts if planning delegations were changed, reduced, modified? Would this be a good outcome or a not so good outcome? I do not know, and as such, we should be asking for a briefing on this matter so we have a thorough understanding of the issues. Councillors, you will note I've included comparisons with other Tier 1 local governments, and I'd like to stress that I expect that would be the big 3, as this will provide valuable information as well. Motion 17, and we heard that tonight, also stood out to me, in particular the staff comments or lack of. Unlike the other motions whereby staff advice already currently be undertaken or reasons why a further report is not necessary, for this motion it was not the case. Councillors, it may be that some individuals are against even considering a possible boundary change with Bassendean, and given the answers to my questions at General Forum last week and the correspondence we've all received regarding the Town of Bassendean, where it was very clear that the Town of Bassendean is interested in sitting down and having a chat, there's concern that there was some conflicting information. To make it very clear, and we've heard it, the Town of Bassendean had a special meeting on Monday. The timing of such is not lost on me, when they resolved that Council requests the CEO immediately inform the City of Swan that the Town of Bassendean is a willing partner in boundary adjustment discussions. A possible boundary change, is it a good idea? Are there benefits to the impacted residents? Would this have negative impacts to the City of Swan? Do I support a change of boundary? Without a report, I do not know.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Zanino?
Nothing further to add. I think Councillor Bowman's covered it quite adequately.
Against, that's Councillor Catalano.
So, Councillor Catalano?
Yes, thank you. This is not about one motion. The Local Government Act, as we know, provides for electors and ratepayers to come along and move motions about issues that are very important to them. They volunteer their time to do so. And why is it in the Local Government Act? Because allowing and giving ratepayers and electors an opportunity to do so allows them to participate in the democratic process. That strengthens the institution of government, and it strengthens the institution of this local government. Participation assists us as decision makers, and it keeps our democracy and society civil. The Local Government Act says that this council is to consider these motions at the next meeting. Consider, in my mind, means debate, raise the pros and cons. So I'm extremely disappointed to see that these motions have been lumped together for noting and basically dismissed. I'm disappointed. You can imagine how our ratepayers and electors will feel. This isn't what electors would expect. They'd expect that each one of their motions that they brought along carefully drafted and considered, and that was usually voted on with a very large majority, would be considered by this council. For instance, the motion, and these are motions that are brought to council repeatedly, so that means that there's very strong feeling out there in the community about these issues, about Eastlink, whether that's actually good for our ratepayers and residents, and the effect it's going to have on traffic and perhaps even lack of traffic solutions. For more public open space on the Middleton Oval development. That's been ongoing, it's not resolved. For traffic congestion in Lockridge on Lord Street, for a significant tree register. And, you know, I am concerned about some very old trees in Midland, actually, that if we don't get them on some sort of protection are going to be lost. They're the last of the Eucalyptus rudus, 200, 300-year-old trees. And the issue about the need for more objections so that issues are brought to council and not all done by decisions made by delegated authority. For Henley Brook Avenue, there's strong support that it doesn't go through the Bush Forever site. And the motion to bring the demolition decision for to demolish Arthur Cooper's house.
That's your 3 minutes. I'll ask, is there anyone for the motion? Right. Councillor Henderson?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to touch on, in particular, part 3 of the motion. And I do support it, but I make a reservation. And the reservation is that we are effectively saying that we want to go and have a discussion about this when we actually haven't had a position on it. So it's a cart before the horse, as Councillor Zanino mentioned to me earlier. The realities are that if the committee want to do this, they've got to go out there and come up with a decent answer as to why, and hopefully then we can see where it's all going to go. But I just want to make a point, and that is that if this were to occur, Bassendean Council would probably be the base for it. May well be, may not be. But if it were, the absolute holy grail of Guildford, the library, would be closed by Bassendean Council. They wouldn't be able to afford it or justify it. And the underground power works through Woodbridge, millions of dollars. What would happen with that? It goes on and on. And I think just another example, the street lights down James Street and Meadow Street, $1.35 million, I think it was, for those works to be done. City of Swan would be looking at that in its budget deliberations. So the point I want to make is that the ideal has been put out there, but the practicality and the thought hasn't been put out there, and that's what concerns me most, is that it's been driven by ideology in some terms, if you like, and frankly, we're not about that. We're about proper and due process in my mind. I will support it, however, because once we go through this part, we'll end up with a process and hopefully some outcome that the city can come up with a document for the council to review and determine, and then we can go forward with that. But it's something in my mind that has little foundation to progress, but happy for the discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone against the motion who'd like to speak? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillors, the reason I'm opposed to Councillor Bowman's motion is for the simple reason I prefer Councillor Catalano's motion. Councillor Catalano's motion provides a simpler way for councillors to evaluate and raise alternate motions against each individual elector motion. Now, councillors, you must be wondering, why didn't you yourself, Mr Deputy Mayor, raise your own alternate motion if you felt so strongly about it? Well, the reason is I felt it would bring too much complexity into the meeting, and so I refrained from providing an alternate motion. Fortunately, we have Councillor Catalano's. We do need to have individual consideration of electors' motions. One of the reasons is that local government is a formative training ground for people getting involved in democracy. So this is one of the ways that people learn, and we need to treat their motions seriously by considering them individually. Previously on this council, we have had motions to hold special meetings of council to individually evaluate the motions from the special electors meeting. And this Councillor Catalano's motion, which is will be debated if this one fails, is an example of that. It's happened on many occasions before. Now to address the important issue of the potential merger of Midland Guildford Ward, or parts of Midland Guildford Ward, with the town of Bassendean. Councillors, the Midland Guildford Ward, at least most of it, and the town of Bassendean would certainly have common purpose. It is worth noting, though, that the Midland Guildford Ward is about 5 times the size of the town of Bassendean, and the effect would be a reverse takeover, but that would not be such a good thing, not such a bad thing, because it would mean that the Midland Guildford Ward could acquire its own administration relatively easily without going through a massive reorganisation. Other things that we need to think about are examples of how decisions would be made differently. Just imagine that Midland Guildford Ward plus Bassendean tacked onto the side of it. As Councillor Catalano said, the recent demolition of the Senior Citizens Centre on the Midland Oval might have gone in a different direction. I always remember the fence in Guildford that a resident wanted to be 10 centimetres higher than the approved standard so that their children would be protected because they only had room for a playground in the front garden. Well, I'm pretty sure all the Midland Guildford Ward councils and Bassendean councils would have supported that. The Midland Oval goes without saying. And then there is, of course, the numerous heritage decisions in Guildford, and we've delegated all that to the city. So, councillors, that's the reason I'm opposed to Councillor Bowman's motion, because I want to support Councillor Catalano's.
I'll call, is there anyone for the motion? Anyone would like to speak for the motion? If there's not, I'll hand over the chair to the Deputy Mayor. Thank you. I'd just like to enter into the debate to say that in regard to 14.1 point 1 regarding the merge with Bassendean Council. The conversation I had with the Mayor post the annual electors meeting was confidently there was no general interest. That was as it stood. There has been some changes currently. Now there is interest, as we've all discussed, and I just want to let you know that I support this motion at this stage for the record, but I do not at this stage yet now see a reason for this boundary change in light of what may come. I'm happy to have those discussions with the CEO, with the town of Bassendean, to see what will become, but obviously it would need to be far more in depth and outlined. So thank you. So I'm now going to put the motion. Well, wait a minute. So Councillor Bowman, would you like to close?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, Councillor Catalano said we should be considering all the motions. Well, this is what is before us at the moment. Yes, Councillor Johnson is correct that he could have put an alternative motion in. Anyone could have put an alternative motion in. We seem to have focused in the debate on the merger. I'm trying to struggle to find even the word merger. It was a discussion to see if there's any benefits, interest, or anything like that. But we've all just focused on that. What I find extremely interesting is not one person mentioned planning. Most of the motions, if I did a theme, were on planning. Most of the email complaints I get is about planning. There was 7, 8 motions in there about planning, and not one person has mentioned planning. Councillors, electors.
Actually, I
Just retain
I
your seat
actually
for a minute.
did actually.
Can you just stand up, please, and state your point of order, please?
I did mention planning issues. In fact, I mentioned it about the need for more than for less than 11 objections for it to come out of delegated authority. So, I mean, not correct.
Okay. So, Councillor Bowman, I won't accept that, Councillor Catalona. Councillor Bowman, if you could return.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And now I've got to try and get my head back for that interruption. Councillors, it was open to everybody. It was open to everyone to have a look at those motions. There was discussion and mention about the Henley Brook Avenue. Well, it's quite clear this council had a resolution. I was probably shocked when the Swan Valley ratepayers brought that one up, and I thought, well, perhaps they didn't know of this resolution. And that's why I've suggested in my opening debate that I'd like to see at least a phone conversation from the staff to each of those who made their motion, just so they're aware of it. But wanting to be heard, councillors, together with 4 other councillors, we got to hear every motion that everyone put in before the closed deadline. If we hadn't have had that special electors meeting on Monday night, we wouldn't have got to hear all of them. And that, to me, was more important. So, councillors, motions here, officers have provided comment. I've picked 2 that I thought needed some more work. Nobody else is putting anything else forward. Please support my motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Right, I'm going to put that vote to the put it to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Bowman, just raise your hand nice and high. Councillor Dawn, Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, not Councillor Knight, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Howlett, and myself. And I did have your name there, Councillor Prodovnik. It was going to come to you. Thank you. And all those against? So Deputy Mayor, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Singh, Councillor Knight. So that's a carried 11-4. Okay, then we move on. So we move on to 14.1.3. Nomination Deputy Mayor for JDAP, page 69. Deputy Member, the same there. Deputy Member for JDAP. Councillor Bowman, if you'd like to read out your alternate motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My motion is council resolves to nominate Councillor Henderson as the Deputy Member to the Development Assessment Panel, and to authorise the CEO to advise the Minister of Planning of Council's nomination for consideration. The reason for the motion, we had to provide one of the 13 councillors, and Councillor Henderson has had previous experience as a JDAP member, has undertaken the required training and is available when it usually meets.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Zanino, thank you. If you'd like to read out your, well, don't, that's fine. Is there anyone against? Councillor Howlett, do you wish to debate it? No. So,
You can put the item. You can put the item. If you know
yep, so I'll put that, all those in favour? So we have a Deputy Mayor Johnson, we've got Councillor Singh, Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Zanito, Councillor Henderson, and myself. And sorry, Councillor Brodovnik, you must wave like a bit higher. Thank you. All those against? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, and Councillor Howlett. So that's carried 10-5. Thank you very much. Then we move on to 14.1.4. Is that right? Just checking. I've got a big agenda. Compliance audit return 1st of January 2023 to 31st of December 2023, and that's on page 72. So if a councillor that would like to move the officer's recommendation, Councillor Bowman. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henderson. Councillor Catalano, would you like to speak against the motion? Was first. Well, so Councillor Bowman, Councillor Henderson, would you like to speak too? No. Is there anyone against? Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. I cannot adopt the compliance return with the knowledge of the 4 non-compliant issues, and in particular 16 breaches of the Local Government Functions and General Regulations 1996 and the city's procurement policy for the supply of goods and services under $250,000 because there was no invitation for tenders for the supply of cleaning services between November 2022 and 2023. I'm not prepared to overlook non-compliance, and I need to know more as to how the risk of this has been dealt with, rather than being informed that such breaches does occur on occasion, which indicates to me that it's likely to occur again and that there's going to be no changes. Operational risk, governance risk, of not meeting regulatory requirements, financial, cultural and reputational risk is the responsibility of this council, ultimately. I think we heard that at a briefing session. I'm not here to be a rubber stamp. I have an obligation and a responsibility to oversee risk, both forward and backward. And I'm looking and seeking proactive adjustments and improvements before I do give my approval.
Thank you. Is there anyone against the motion that would like to speak? Is there anyone for the motion? If there's no one for or against the motion, I'd like to put that to the... Oops. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bowman, you're right of reply. We seem to cut you off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And Madam Mayor, as the chair of the Audit Committee and for my 3rd year on the Audit Committee, I can rest assure you and the other councillors, I do not rubber stamp anything. This was discussed in detail at the Audit Committee, and I actually like to congratulate this council or the staff for actually not just doing a tick and flick, which is known for in a number of local governments, and I am dealing with one of those in another role. Madam Mayor, I asked the question about the contract management, the tenders, because I was concerned. But it was a great response, and the reason why it was a great response, because we actually, staff, are performance managing the contracts. I have concerns with that sometimes, that local government is not a good contract manager at times. But in this situation, the contract for the cleaners, they were not capable of doing the job. And if I'm correct, I think the council were the ones that picked this one as the contract as well. So they got terminated. However, there's a little part of the Act that says if you spend $250,000 or more, you've got to go to tender. And because of the time we terminated the contract and before staff got another contract in place, $250,000 was spent. Sounds a lot, but if I was to ask someone about our cleaning budget, I'm looking around, I'd say our cleaning budget runs in the millions of dollars, and so therefore when it's 4 or 5 months, $250,000 quickly moves up. When I look at the other non-compliance issues, there were minor things. The compliance audit return is not to catch staff out. It's to remind staff of what needs to be done. And a really good example of that was removing from the register all returns related to the person under 575 and 576. A lot of things happening in local government. It's easy enough to forget and miss that one. And I can guarantee you, I don't think it'll be missed again the following year. Councillors, as I said before, when this was discussed at the Audit Committee, we discussed it in detail. We've gone through each of those, and I'm actually grateful that staff actually have gone through it thoroughly and haven't just done a tick and flick, which is common in local government.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Deputy Mayor Johnson, Councillor Singh, Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Prodovnik and myself, and all those against. Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Knight and Councillor Howlett. That's carried 11-4. And we move on to 14.2.1. Consent to advertise draft local planning scheme number 18 on page 100. Proposed motion from Councillor Catalano. Would you like to read out your alternate motion?
That the council resolve to 1. Defer adoption of the draft local planning scheme number 18 for the City of Swan to replace local planning scheme number 17 until A. A review of the local planning strategy has been conducted, and B. All of the actions identified in a... Sorry, I can't see that. All of the actions identified in a reviewed local planning strategy are inserted in the draft LPS 18. 2. Accordingly, defer advertising and referral to the Western Australian state government agencies. The reason for the motion. The draft LPS 18 as presented does not align with the local planning strategy actions, including but not limited to A. Action 1. Review the local planning scheme to investigate the use of planning mechanisms to retain and enhance the urban forest coverage within the city and to achieve the principles of the local biodiversity strategy. B. Action 3. Ensure that the provisions of the city's local planning scheme and local planning policies are consistent with Gnangara groundwater protection requirements and consider including a special control area under the local planning scheme. 2. The draft LPS 18 as presented will be a poor planning document as it relies on an outdated local planning strategy that does not identify Ellenbrook and its hinterland as a metropolitan centre and a major economic hub of the North East sub-region.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Howlett? Councillor Catalano, if you'd like to speak to... anyone against? Councillor Henderson, do you wish to debate it? Councillor Catalano?
Thank you. In the report that we've got, it does state that this LPS 18 reorganises. It doesn't change. It doesn't update the local planning scheme 17. It just puts in some deemed provisions. But the point is that the local planning scheme was actually drafted before 2008. That is almost 20 years ago. In that 20 years, my goodness, we have seen some changes. We really have seen the demographic pull from Ellenbrook and its impact on Midland. There is no mention in the local planning strategy, which is the document that is supposed to inform the local planning scheme. There is nothing in the local planning strategy about the importance or planning for Ellenbrook and the hinterland. So to put it out for advertising at this stage, we were told, in fact, I've been on council, nearly 6 years, and it's the first time that I put together those two documents, the local planning strategy and the local planning scheme. It's the first time I really became aware that the local planning strategy informs the local planning scheme. We had a briefing session last week, but it isn't enough to convince me that what we need right now is just for the same old plan, the same old 20-year-old plan, local planning scheme, to just be, okay, we'll just move on with this and keep this going, and a local planning strategy that doesn't even mention Ellenbrook as a regional centre. I mean, I'm starting to see, and the other thing that I've raised is that two actions from the local planning strategy, which relate to environmental issues, haven't been incorporated into this local planning scheme 18, which is an action that's supposed to have been done and supposed to be done. It's supposed to be incorporated into this scheme, into this revision. And now I think I understand why our natural environment has suffered and is suffering and will continue to suffer if we don't start putting express provision for it in the planning documents. And that's also the same for Ellenbrook as a regional centre. It has to be expressly in the planning documents. These are the highest level planning documents. It has to be expressly in there that Ellenbrook is a major metropolitan sub-regional centre, and that there needs to be adequate planning for that.
Councillor Hallett, would you like to speak for the motion?
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you. Any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, councillors. I want to get down to the last point, and that was Ellenbrook, and a page and a half of officer comment pulling apart pretty much all of the foundation of what has just been said. So it says, in response to reason 2, it should be noted that the local planning strategy is consistent with the WA Planning Commission's State Planning Policy 4.2, activity centres, which identifies Ellenbrook as a secondary centre. Duh. So it's there. They perform an important role in the regional economy and provide essential services to their catchments. Let's go and touch on some of the other things. We know that if we push particular approaches that do not suit the WA Planning Commission, because let's face it, whilst this might be our document, WAPC actually tear it apart and tell us what we're going to do. And I've got to say, and that's been evidenced by what's happened to the Nedlands City Council. I want to say one thing though, after having read this document twice, and I must say it's just almost like watching paint dry with respect to people that love this sort of work. But the point I want to make is that there are things in there that I don't like. And I'm sure there's things in there that a lot of us don't like. But a lot of it is there because the state says it will be there and you will like it or you'll lump it. And that those deemed provisions in particular are taking away significantly from what councils used to do, and that in itself is one of the things that I dislike intensely about local planning scheme. Local planning scheme 17, yes, it has been around for a while, but we had a couple of briefings in this regard. But critically, the WA Planning Commission actually say that our scheme's pretty good. So let's start off on base. Our scheme is pretty good. 18 is going to make it a little bit better, perhaps with all these deemed provisions. But the point I want to make is we need to progress this. We need to have the community have their say. Very important that they do that. I do foreshadow my motion after this, should this fail. Whilst I don't necessarily like a lot of this stuff, I do think we could do a lot better from a planning perspective in this state. But people will have their opportunity to say so, and that's what we want. So let's progress this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Is there anyone for the motion? Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm going to support this, and in particular, the reasons given by Catalana are to investigate the use of planning mechanisms to retain and enhance the urban forest coverage within the city, and most importantly, in my view, to achieve the principles of the local biodiversity strategy. I do recall when that first came out many years ago, when I first, whatever, 6 or 7 years ago, I recall when I first got on council, I wanted to know why we're not taking note of this when we're making planning decisions. And I was told, oh, it's only advisory, councillor. It's not actually part of the planning scheme. And how often does this come up? Well, it comes up very frequently. At the last meeting, when we looked at Ellenbrook Northwest, that decision was all about our local biodiversity strategy and how the WA Planning Commission should take note of that. So in my view, we do need to integrate the principles of the local biodiversity strategy into our local planning scheme. Now, I do understand, councillors, that the whole concept of local planning scheme 18 is really a redraft into a different format of local planning scheme 17, and without any changes to the actual planning concept. It's just presented in a more modern, planner-friendly format. But does that really take us anywhere? We've got to do it. Why can't we add these two simple things in there? I really don't believe that the WAPC would object. I'm sure that everybody in our community would support this, particularly integrating the principles of the local biodiversity strategy. If we have a biodiversity strategy, we have to give it lawful effect through our planning scheme. So to me, it is self-evident that it needs to happen. It needs to happen now, given the environmental situation that we are facing in our world. We need to speed up our actions. So to say, oh well, it's just an administrative change, it's not appropriate to incorporate the biodiversity strategy into it. Well, I think it's too late for that kind of idea. I think the WAPC would support this. So that's the reason I'm supporting Councillor Catalano's motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is anyone against the motion? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I actually agree with Councillor Catalano because it doesn't update. It is out of date, our town planning scheme. Interesting meeting I was at, or a training seminar I was at on Monday with a number of mayors and councillors. We got talking about planning and planning schemes, and ours is pretty in date compared to a number of them. I question the need to do it. It's like me getting my old car and getting a brand new paint job. It's still an old car. But what's been proposed has been tried. And the staff have actually said, attempt to include these provisions in the draft LPS number 18 after the WAPC's rejection of such an approach elsewhere. So others have tried and they've been rejected. We've also been given a scope, and it's not within the scope. They want local governments, and it's been there since September 2020 in their instructions, to bring it up to the new paint job. They want the new paint job for our town planning schemes like everyone else. That's what we need to do first, and then we can work on everything else, because I agree with Councillor Henderson. There's some things in the town planning scheme I am totally not happy with. And if we talk about the biodiversity strategy, it was only 6 months ago we couldn't even get that for members of the public because it wasn't publicly available on our website. So there's things to do. But we're being told to do the paint job. If my wife asked me to do a paint job with a car, I'd be thinking of wasting money, but we're being told to actually do it. And what we've been suggested to do in this moment has been rejected by the WAPC with other local governments. So why would we go down the line of something where we know it has previously been rejected? Do we think at the City of Swan we are going to be treated any different to the other local governments that were rejected? Please, if there's a reason why, tell me, otherwise I cannot support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Is anyone for the motion? Is there anyone against the motion who'd like to speak? There's no one for or against. Ask the mover for right of reply.
Yes, thank you. Paint job. Look, let's just do the job properly. That's what I'm saying. And that is for the benefit of all users. I'm sure that the WAPC would understand a job done properly. They've approved the local planning strategy, so they have approved Action 1, which relates to the biodiversity strategy, and Action 3, which relates to the water in the Nangara Mound. They've approved those already in the strategy. What we haven't done is we haven't expressly included them in the local planning scheme as our own strategy says we are to do. That's what we haven't done. And that's what I'm saying needs to be done, because otherwise we're going to get absolutely no environmental protection. It's going to carry on just the same, maybe clunking on for another 20 years. And it's not about what I like or don't like. It's about what has to be done, because that's the local planning strategy.
Point of order.
Just retain seat for a minute. Councillor Henderson,
I'm
what was
sorry.
your point of order?
It was said that we're basically we will say what we want, but the WAPC tells us what we want. So the argument is not in fact factual.
Thank you. Resume, Councillor.
WAPC have handed down the Dean provisions. I don't have any comment to make about the Dean provisions. I've got comment to make about the fact that we haven't included actions from our own local planning strategy that are identified as actions that have got to be included into the next LPS update. And we haven't done that. And that relates to the environment. And that's what I'm objecting to. I think we should do that. And, you know, if the WAPC don't like it, they'll let us know. We don't stop doing something just because we think that somebody might not like it. We do it, and then we act if something else is required of us. That's called proactive. And the other thing is that the LPS 17, pretty good, is it? The LPS 18 makes it better. How? How? By reorganising it with Dean provisions? I don't get it. I don't see it, how that makes it improved. All it does is puts in the Dean provisions. The thing is that we haven't fulfilled our own local planning strategy. It should be expressly in the local planning scheme. That's the overarching document that we make all our decisions by. And the same goes for Ellenbrook as a regional centre. It's high time that that hinterland and that regional centre is included in the local planning strategy, because that's the way we get good outcomes for everybody in the City of Swan. Good transport outcomes, good planning outcomes, good environmental outcomes, good social outcomes, because we expressly included in the local planning scheme.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. I'll now put the alternate motion to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hand. So Deputy Mayor Johnson, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Singh, just checking, Councillor Knight, Councillor Howlett. All those against, please raise your hand. Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson and myself. So, and Councillor Prodovnik. Yeah. Motion is lost. We have a foreshadowed motion from Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council resolve to 1, adopt the officer's recommendation 1 to 6. 2, adopt an additional point 7, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to undertake any minor grammatical or formatting corrections required to improve the clarity and readability of the draft local planning scheme number 18 prior to public advertising.
So I'll ask for a seconder. Councillor Jones? Is anyone against? Councillor Catalano? Councillor Henderson? Do you wish to debate it? Okay. Is there anyone against? Yes.
I didn't wish to debate, so you can move straight to a vote.
So we'll move. Can't now. It's already passed. I've already called it. Yes, I did. Yep. I already passed that through and asked.
Yes, so Councillor,
Yep.
you've ruled at this point in time,
Okay.
so you've just got to then move.
Well, I'll move that and put that to the vote. All those in favour of Councillor Henderson's motion? I've got Deputy Mayor Johnson, Councillor Singh, Councillor Oringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Prodovnik and myself. All those against? Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Knight and Councillor Howlett. So the motion is carried, 11-4. And then move on.
14.22.
So now move on to 14.2.2, MRS Amendment 141410. That is part lot 96 Starflower Road, Henleybrook on page 370. Proposed motion, oh, sorry, my apologies. Councillor Bowman, you had withdrawn this alternate motion prior to the meeting, is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you. So Councillor Catalano, if you'd like to read your alternate motion.
Thank you. That Council resolves to 1, advise the WAPC that it does not support the MRA Scheme Amendment 1410 proposal to include part of lot 96 Starflower Road, Henleybrook in the urban zone under the MRS, Metropolitan Region Scheme. Reason: 1, the land contains beautiful examples of magnificent remnant trees that provide desperately needed forest cover and important biodiversity and habitat values. 2, the land should be left as public purposes for future generations.
And I'll ask for a seconder. Oh. Councillor Howlett. Now, is there anyone against? Councillor Jones, do you wish to debate it? Okay. So we'll put the motion. It was already passed through. Again. We did say? Thank you. Councillor Catalano, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. This amendment appears to me to be about packing people in and not about sustainability or for providing for healthy communities or a healthy environment. Public purpose. Can't we leave some land for future generations? Who knows what they will need to have it for? Whether to plant more trees, whether to make it part of a nature corridor, or for some other essential community and public need. We've got to start thinking about reserving things for future generations. The environmental qualities of this strip of land are important. There's beautiful old mature trees on there. We've got to leave some land for the environment, for the climate, for other animals and birds, and they are magnificent and beautiful and very old remnant trees. They're irreplaceable, hundreds of years old. They were here before this colony. Leave the trees for future generations of humans and other animals. Birds that can at least use them as a stop as they are teaching their young to fly before risking the flight over Drumpelia. It's also important to have this land reserved as a noise buffer to humans who are going to be residing on the side that's closest to Henley Brook, to Starflower. There needs to be a buffer. People can't be living right up against effectively a highway and concrete, huge concrete walls. It's just an unsustainable. Excuse me, sorry. Thank you, just disrupting me there.
You can continue.
Thank you. I was going to. It's an unhealthy and unsustainable environment for people to be living in, and it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary for us to be planning things like this at this stage, for be using land like this at this stage. This appears, again, as I've said, appears to me about packing people in and not about sustainability. And it'll be us, it'll be the city that will be left to pick up the repercussions of further damage to the natural environment resulting from people having to live in such appalling conditions abutting up to the road. We can do better than this, and if we can't do it now, what hope have we got for our children in the future? I urge you to say no and send that message to the state government.
Thank you. Councillor Howler, would you like to speak to the alternate motion?
I know nothing further to add.
Thank you. Is anyone for the motion? Is anyone against the motion? Thank you. Councillor Lana, you're... Oh. Councillor just a moment, please. Is anyone against the motion? Councillor Henderson?
Councillors, I'm going to support Councillor Catalano on this motion. And the reason, my reasons are different to Councillor Catalano's in some ways. This piece of land was taken to facilitate Drumpelia Drive into Ellenbrook across Nangara Road. And it was excised off Whiteman Park. That park that's supposed to be land for future generations that you talk of. In fact, it's also slated in the future for a train station, if you weren't aware. One of the things that the Planning Ministry, of course, wants to do is put lots and lots of housing packed into train stations, probably high-rise. So I can see this as a precursor to part of that. Now, the trees aren't necessarily hundreds of years old. There are some there, but there is one significant issue that I do have. We hear discussion about the trees here, but where do we see the discussion about the thousands of trees that were mowed down to put a rail line in on more land that was taken from Whiteman Park? We didn't see one person out there in front of a bulldozer. Thousands of trees were absolutely flattened, pushed into piles and munched up. So I see a little bit of conflict there. The key thing here is that it's actually priority 2 water. The government has been very effective in just simply for its own convenience saying, oh, look, we know it was priority 1. Indeed, it was priority 1. We'll just move it off to priority 2. That makes it a little easier. Priority 2, well, actually, we'll make it priority 3 so we can put houses all over it. That's how it works, councillors. And that's how the state works. We just go along for the ride. But I'm more than happy to say no. I've fought this fight for 20 plus years because frankly, Whiteman Park is not there to be plundered. It already is being. Marshall Road in particular, putting a train line across the section of land there, isolating hundreds of hectares of land, has been an absolute disgrace. and a film studio just makes me laugh. So, councillors, I support this motion. Thank you.
Here, councillors, anyone against the motion? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I'm not against anything that anyone said, and I actually agree with everything that everyone has said. Maybe not as passionately as put by some of the councillors. And you would have noticed my alternative motion was for refusal. But the question I have is this the right stage to do it? Is it now, or is it when we get the structure plan stage? And is it when we do the subdivisional layout? Is there more chance of us protecting this area at those stages as opposed to saying no now and then potentially WAPC doing what they want? I totally agree. I, at the Agenda Forum, talked about the buffer zone for the odour, for the pumping station. Got one on Millhouse Road, and 150 metres will never be enough. The train line, there will need to be various requirements there for noise suppression in the houses. And some of our Midland Guildford Ward councillors probably know all about that with the airplanes and that. Yes, I agree. It appears we're packing them in. But is it the right time? That's what I say. I actually now believe that asking for more detail in the structure plan stage is the time to do it, where there may be trade-offs, so we can actually protect various areas and they can actually use that as public open space when they add it to the other piece of land there as well. And that's why I'm not supporting this one. I won't particularly support the officer's recommendation unless I can get a few amendments in, changes in there as well. But that's the reason why.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Is anyone for the motion? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'm for this motion, and I would ask this rhetorical question: would the staff's recommendation have been different if we had previously incorporated the local biodiversity strategy into our planning scheme? I think it probably would be different, and this is a reason why we will at some point have to incorporate that biodiversity strategy into our planning scheme. If you look at the advice under section 48A of the Environmental Protection Act, it says this. It says the remnant vegetation provides habitat for threatened species of black cockatoo and priority listed quenda. Implementation of the amendment may result in the removal of remnant vegetation and potential fauna habitat to facilitate future residential development, etc. So, councillors, I'm told, I've read that in the past those black cockatoos were so numerous they would almost blacken the sky. There were huge flocks of them, and now you see them around. I've only ever seen them in groups of 4 or 5 at the most. We do need to retain whatever remnant trees we have. There's plenty of development land out there that doesn't have remnant trees on it. So if there are remnant trees, we need to keep them. So that's the reason I'm supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Is anyone against the motion? There's no one against the motion. Is anyone for the motion, the last call? Then I'll put that to the vote. Oh, sorry, right of reply, Councillor Catalano.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Councillor Henderson. We've actually been aligned on this, these issues around Whiteman Park pretty much since I've been on council, and thank you for supporting that. And because I think it is extremely important that we let the state government know that we are not happy. We are not happy. I mean, and why would we be? I mean, it's outrageous actually what's gone on, and I agree with everything you said. Including about the water. Waiting for the structure plan stage. I just don't get that. I mean, you don't kick the can down the road. You just do not. You deal with it now. You get proactive and you deal with it right now. The earlier, the better. When it comes to all of these decisions, the earlier, the better. Because otherwise they'll say, oh yeah, but you approved it, at that stage. So why would you want to change your approval now? It's a no. I mean, I think we've said this. I think I remember last meeting, I was pretty much saying the same thing. We don't kick these things down the road. I mean, okay, if the state government decides that they're going to go ahead with this amendment, guess what? The structure plan comes back anyway. So that is not the decision for tonight. The decision for tonight is not, oh, let's kick this can down the road. It's, are we going to approve it tonight or not? So proactive. Now, as for black cockatoos, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to tell you, but they're on their way out.
Point of order, Madam Mayor.
Would you resume your seat, please, Councillor Catalano?
It's
Councillor
closing.
Bowman, what
it's
was your point of order?
Closing debate, and the only person that spoke against it was me, and I did not make any mention of black cockatoos. I made mention of 2-point structure plan and the subdivisional layout only.
Hang on a minute. Mr CEO, did you have anything different?
If it's not relevant, then Councillor Catalano should. It's up to you to rule.
Yep, so Councillor Catalano, there's no point of, no point of order. Oh, sorry, there is a point of order. Councillor Bowman, thank you. Councillor Catalano, if you could take that on board.
I've got nothing more to add, thank you.
Thank you. Right, so I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Deputy Mayor Johnson, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Oringo, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Howlett. Those against? Councillor Singh, Councillor Bowman, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Prodovnik and myself. Motion's carried. 8-7. Thank you. And then we're moving on. Move on to 14.3.1. I know we've got some people in the gallery here tonight for proposed amendment K to the Melbourne Springs Development Plan, number 6, lot 9295 Elmridge Parkway, Ellenbrook, DP 6K, page 452. Proposed motion by Councillor Bowman. If you'd like to read your alternate motion, Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I move the Council resolves to 1, recommend to the West Australian Planning Commission not approve the proposed amendment to Melbourne Springs Development Plan number 6, and the reason is inconsistent with State Policy 4.2 activity centres, which encourages walkability to local centres for day-to-day needs. It fails to meet the intent and objective of the Melbourne Springs Development Plan to create a neighbourhood with a distinct village centre and expectations of Melbourne Springs residents that this will be retained as a village centre with services, facilities for all users, including those with disabilities, and to foster a sense of community and local identity.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Howlett? Is there anyone against who wishes to debate the item? No? If there isn't, I'll put that straight. Push that motion. Sorry? Would you like to speak to the motion? Right.
Come back to you. Just through the chair, in terms of unopposed businesses, I saw there was no one who opposed the business. So in accordance with clause 8.4(1), immediately after the motion has been proposed and seconded, the presiding member asks the meeting if any member opposes it. 2, if no member opposes the motion, the presiding member may declare the motion carried without debate and without taking a vote. As no one opposed to the presiding member, can simply at that point I've ruled that the item be carried unanimously.
So I move that that item was carried unanimously. So that means to move on to, that was, I didn't hear anyone say, no,
No one indicated they were against.
no. Right. Let's move on. Move on to 14.3.2.
You're up to 14.3.2.
We'll now move on to 14.3.2, existing retaining walls and fill, lot 259, number 51, Jinder Road, Coongamaya, DA 58523, page 501. Proposed motion, Councillor Howlett, all ready to go?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my motion is that the council resolve to 1, not approve the retrospective application for the filling of land and associated retaining wall at lot 259, number 51, Jinder Road, Coongamaya. And the reason for the motion, 1, the retaining wall and boundary wall, bracket colour-bond fence, above, by the virtue of building bulk entailed by its length and height, have, A, an adverse visual impact as viewed from the outdoor living area and broader backyard of the adjoining property at number 49 Ginger Road, Kungamaya. B, failed to meet the required minimum setback. And C, failed to obtain agreement from the adjoining property at number 49 Ginger Road, Kungamaya. 2, the council is not satisfied that the proposed landscaping by way of screening shrubbery will provide an effective and sufficient screen so as to minimise the extent of overlook into the outdoor living area and broader backyard of the adjoining property at number 49 Ginder Road, thereby diminishing the privacy enjoyed by this property. And 3, the council is not satisfied that the application has demonstrated that the land has been filled with clean fill free of contaminants.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Johnson? Do you wish to speak to the alternate motion? Was anyone against? Councillor McCulloch, do you wish to debate it? Thank you. Councillor Howlett, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Councillors, this application is before us once again. First heard in August 2022, where we as a council were unanimous in its refusal. It then came back to us in December 23, where council voted 6 for and 8 against the officer's recommendation to approve. Albeit for a clear lack of support of the officer's recommendation reflected in the voting, a decision of council was not made. And as there was no alternate provided, this resulted in a failed motion. Being that a decision wasn't made and there was no clear resolution of council, SAT were unable to hear the applicant's appeal. And this is why it is back before us now. Council has been instructed by SAT to make a decision. And councillors, this is for all accounts the very same motion that we considered in December 23, albeit with the change of screening vegetation from lily pilly to orange jasmine. It's for these reasons that I urge you to be consistent and refuse this retrospective application once again. Please support my motion. Do not approve the retrospective applications for the reasons contained in my alternate motion that I read out and for those that I've just expressed to you.
Thank you, Councillor Howlett. Deputy Mayor Johnson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, councillors, as Councillor Howlett has explained, back in 2022, this council unanimously opposed this large swimming pool in a backyard in Congamar. It's a retrospective application. The neighbour, when the neighbour, who's I know is in the public gallery, realised that a large swimming pool was being constructed by a next door neighbour, contacted the city to ask what was going on, and I understand that the city requested that the owner of the home where the swimming pool was being installed please submit a development application, but that didn't happen until after the swimming pool was complete. So councillors, you are allowed to put in a retrospective application, but it is interesting that that was the sequence of events. Councillors, in our planning rules, there is a concept of a deemed to comply concept for retaining walls. And my understanding was that this retaining wall, because of its height, needed to be set 1.5 metres back from the boundary. But it's not set back at all. It is actually, I believe, just 10 centimetres back from the boundary. It is effectively on the boundary. And it's extremely high. It's blocking, completely blocking the flow of air into the neighbouring property. A different design could have been pursued had an application been made. It probably would have been pointed out to the applicant by the staff that one way to do it was, instead of filling the backyard completely, it could be half cut and half fill. And then the swimming pool could presumably have fitted in without a very large retaining wall. And in addition, if the spar was removed, then a setback of 1.5 metres could have been achieved. This never have need come to council. It could have been approved under deemed to comply. But here we are. So, councillors, if it does not comply with the deemed to comply provisions, so planning law looks at design principles. Development that considers and responds to the natural features of the site requires minimal excavation and fill. Well, it's been all fill. It could have been half excavation and half fill, but it wasn't. It said all finish levels respecting the natural ground level at lot boundary of the site. Well, this large retaining wall in a small suburban garden does not reflect the natural ground, does not respect the natural ground level at all. So councillors, I believe we need to stick with our existing decision that I believe was extremely sound. So councillors, please support Councillor Hallett's motion. Thank you.
you, Deputy Mayor. Is there any councillor against the motion who'd like to speak against the motion? Councillor McCulloch?
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I just want to address a couple of things here, just in regards to this item. This matter is currently active in SAT, and this current proposal before us is an invitation to reconsider that deemed refusal. This amended proposal before us responds to Council's concerns raised during the debate with respect to the landscaping. This is the third time that this proposal has been referred to Council for determination, and on each occasion the City's Planning Department has recommended approval. This proposal has planning merit and meets, I will state, the design principles of the R codes. Although there has been some retrospectively obtained development approval for walls and fills, the administration previously granted approval for a building permit for the pool. It was only after the pool was installed that the city advised that development approval was required. So that approval of the pool is still extant. The pool fence and building compliance have been addressed, and this proposal satisfies the relevant legislation. Councillors, I believe that the applicant has now responded to the concerns raised by the neighbour. They've met with City's planning officers to provide as much information and clarity as possible to ensure requirements were met in regard to the planning framework. There have been ongoing discussions. The retaining wall is set back off the common boundary between the two properties by 200 mils. This gap already features a slope downwards into the neighbour's property. The dispute in height, we know, is most likely based on a measurement being taken from the neighbour's property on the decline, which exacerbates the perceived height of the wall. I said in my debate previously, Coongamara is a sloping suburb. It's an older suburb, and older blocks are now being retained to accommodate for runoff and extreme weather. I believe that we have that fair and reasonable solution, and the officer's recommendation presents a workable compromise in which the interests of the neighbour and her tenants is preserved. At the same time, the rights of the applicant to improve his property has also been recognised. So, councillors, it is time for this proposal, which has been submitted after extensive discussion with the Planning Department and which is a fair compromise and meets the relevant legislation, to be approved. We have heard opinions of solutions. The fence is extremely high, it's blocking the flow of air. Councillors, I have been there. They are open backyards, reasonably large backyards. We need to look at this. We need to follow our officers' recommendations practicably and logically. And I urge you not to support this, and I will foreshadow the officers' recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor McCulloch. Does any councillors like to speak for the motion?
Question.
Question?
Could the CEO advise, should the SAT consider that this council is belligerent, could we find ourselves having to pay costs?
Through you, Mr. CEO.
That's quite a difficult question to answer. You'd have to define what belligerence is. So if belligerent is that we've refused to make a decision, then yes, you could be up for a cost, but simply providing an approach which says we didn't agree with something wouldn't probably be deemed belligerent.
Should that go against us, what would we have some idea of what those costs might be?
So again, through the chair, as given to you in legal advice earlier in this week, That made quite clear reference that SAT is a own cost jurisdiction. So the starting principle is that each party bears its own costs. You would only be bearing costs, I think, if you chose not to make a decision. Simply not supporting the application or refusing the application wouldn't be, I believe, again, personally, a grounds for a cost order against the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had Councillor Bowman next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I've had some concern with this item for quite some time, and I've asked a few more bits of information that, and councillors recall at the Agenda Forum asking about planning, building. I was fortunate enough to look at the approval for the pool this afternoon. It was private certification. It had the retaining wall already there, had all the levels at 9.91. It actually showed the neighbour's property being higher. So there is an issue. There is an issue there. From my recollection, when I went to visit on site quite some months ago, the pool is closer to the boundary than what's on the plans. The spa is in a different location, but I'm happy to be proven wrong. But ultimately, SAT will determine this application. SAT will determine it. We've heard lots of facts and we've heard lots of fiction. And to be honest, we keep getting conflicting advice on the levels, the heights, and all that. And so I actually think SAT determining now is probably the best way forward for this council. Didn't have development approval. Well, that's not on us. Buyer beware, or installer beware. Your responsibility is go find out if you need approval. This person didn't. That's not on us. That's on them. No one has the right to develop without the necessary approvals. Yes, retrospective approval may be granted, but it may not be granted. And in this case, if that's the decision that council choose and it's upheld by SAT, that'll be a lesson to others to learn. I do agree with Councillor McCulloch, it is time we deal with this proposal. I'm supporting the motion, which is a refusal. It will go to SAT. The SAT member will determine it, and then that's finished with.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Councillor Catalano, question?
Thank you. It's a question for the CEO or the governance officer. When we make this decision, the SAT costs are not a relevant planning consideration for the making of this decision. Am I right?
Through you, Mr. CEO.
Thank you. What is relevant is the council's obligation under Local Government Act to make a decision that is spelled out in the legal advice. So what is relevant for you is the requirement to make that decision. You need to have it in your mind that if you don't make a decision, there is an impact back on the city. So indirectly, yes, the impact of the SAT requesting council to make a decision and provide guidance and precedent, so it is relevant.
But my question was that in making that decision, you don't take into consideration that costs are not a relevant consideration when making that decision.
So from a planning perspective, no, but in the need to make the decision, yes.
Thank you. I'll just ask again, are there any councillors against the motion who'd like to speak? Are there any councillors for the motion? Right, if there's no more debate, I'll put that to the vote. Right of reply. Councillor Howlett.
Thank you. Keeping it short and sweet. As we've considered this for the third time, I'm sure you all know which way you will be voting. You should have all done your research. Let's put it to the vote.
Thank you very much. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Deputy Mayor Johnson, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Singh, Councillor Aringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Miles, Councillor Knight, Councillor Howlett and myself. And all those against? Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Zanita, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Prodovnik. So it's carried 10-5, thank you. Okay. So moving on now to 14.5.4. Just put that one down. Scribble it down there. As budget review on page 629, proposed motion by Councillor Catalano. If you'd like to read your alternate motion, thanks.
Thank you. that council resolve to 1, not approve the increase of the loan amount for Shady Hills from $5,100,000 to $7,757,846 to fund this project. Approve the mid-year budget minus the $2,657,846 being the amount for the Shady Hills project. 3, lodge the budget review with the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries within 14 days of adoption as per the Local Government Financial Management Regulations 1996. Reason: A, the Shady Hills Road was not endorsed unanimously by Council. B, the road is very costly and costs are likely to increase further as construction commences, and ratepayer funds should be more equitably spent for the benefit of a greater number of ratepayers.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Howlett. Is there anyone against?
I'm against, and I'll foreshadow the officer's original recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Do you wish to debate it? Councillor Catalano.
Yes, it's a number of times I've debated this one, but it boils down to the fact that there's about 200 properties up there, maybe about 200 residents or properties. There's not many people living up at Shady Hills. Originally, this came to council. It was for a $5 million budget. I mean, it was fairly clear if you go out and have a look at the terrain that this is going to cost a lot of money. I mean, we're basically talking about a road up a steep granite gradient. This is not going to be cheap. So $5 million, it was pretty clear from the beginning that it was going to cost more than that. Even the $5 million was a hell of a lot of money to spend on 200 residences. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt, 200 residences, when, you know, people all over the city of Swan are asking for money to be spent in their suburbs. A lot of people are asking for money to be spent in their suburbs. And now it's gone up from 5 million to 7 million, as I predicted, and no doubt it'll keep going up. As I say, it's a pretty steep gradient, and it's granite rock. So we get told that we'll get the money back with the DCPs. Yeah, well, there was a hell of a lot of confusion about whether the land there on the sort of the bottom of the slope was actually going to be given approval, whether it wasn't going to be given approval. No mention of it this time round. It's just a note in a budget adjustment. Thank you for the briefing. Not. Anyway, it's a lot of money. It's a hell of a lot of money. It's more than $7 million now. And I think that money is better spent on a greater number of ratepayers. That's the principles of utilitarianism, and that's the principles that we pretty much run all our rating and economy on. The greater number for the greater good. Kip.
Councillor Howlett, would you like to speak as the seconder?
Nothing further to add, thank you.
Thank you. I'll ask the councillors, anyone against? Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What's the price you put on a life? Because that's what we're doing here. 200 properties. Let's say there's 2.3 people in each of those properties. That's 460 people that we're potentially putting in danger. And this local government, this council, should be one of few metro local governments that totally understands from experience, from knowing people, living next door to people, being in certain clubs with these people, the damage and the impact that bushfires can have on this community, our community. Not my ward community, not Councillor Jones' ward community, our ward community. Now let me tell you one thing, ward accounting, that got ruled out in 1995. Ward accounting is not allowed. End stop. I've just heard that we want to bring ward accounting back without using those words. Now, perhaps it's me, but when I look at what we spend, where is it needed across the whole city. Now, if that happens to be 90% in Balladura because something happened in Balladura and it was absolutely necessary because all their roads are broken and all that, so be it, because it goes on demand. We do not, and we should not, look at expenditure because it's only 200 properties and we're not getting a good return. What is a good return when we potentially put a life in danger? Now, I wasn't on council for the last big fire, but I know what we went through. I know what the community went through. I'm looking at Swan Valley Gidget Gannett Ward councillors, and they can tell us exactly what happened up there. An access road, when you've only got one way out, I think that's a disaster waiting to happen. The costs have gone up. Yes, of course the costs have gone up. The costs have gone up in everything. State government building railway lines, it's gone from 100 million to 500 million on some projects. Our Swan Midland pool, what did we start at and what did we end at? We've just gone through another budget workshop and we've seen from the time items came to our council to make resolutions, I think there was 8 and some of them were less than 6 months, it has gone up. But councillors, how can you support this motion and put 200 properties, roughly 460 people's lives in danger? Because that's what I've heard.
Thank you, Councillor Bowman. Is there anyone for the motion? Deputy Mayor Johnson?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'd like to address particularly the danger issue, councillors. I'm a volunteer firefighter and I've actually attended an incident at Shady Hills. It was after the 2022 vote. What I observed was 2 things. Firstly, the topography and the steepness of the terrain were not made clear to me at all. As a councillor, I was genuinely shocked by it. I thought, how could you possibly build a road over that, what looked like a small mountain to me, which does somewhat go to explain why the cost has escalated so much. But let's address the safety issue. I seem to recall when I was there, there was a fire that was coming up from, potentially going to be coming up from the river. And we had a very large number of trucks there. I think there were probably 40 trucks, and that would have meant in the region of 200 firefighters. There was almost a firefighter for every house there. So how we address fire risk in our community, it's not just through building extra roads, it's through actually having a fire service that can defend people. So we're not just making the place safer by building an extra road. There is a fire service, and in addition, you should have a bushfire evacuation plan. And as it happened when I was there, the fire didn't actually arrive in Shady Hills at all. So councillors, I am not too concerned about that aspect of it. There's a risk for sure, but the risk mitigation is a fire service and volunteer firefighters. I'm concerned about the further escalation of cost. I think that the road should be built to the cost that we've approved, because I'm concerned it will continue to escalate. One thing that I observed when looking at the plans at the time, and then having been to Shady Hills and seeing the housing there, I thought one of the other features of this road is it cuts about 10 kilometres off the drive to Midland. And I think that's quite an important factor in the reason why there's been so much advocacy for the road. So, councillors, this is primarily why I'm supporting Councillor Catalano's motion. The fire danger, is mitigated through having a fire service. The roads, the houses are actually quite far apart. There are trees there, but it's widely spaced trees in grassland. I think that the issue here is we should be focusing on is the cost of the road.
Deputy Mayor, that's your 3 minutes there.
Thank you.
Are there any other councillors against the motion? I have 2, but between the 2, Councillor Jones. you like to speak?
Thank you. This project up in Shady Hills was a state government project that the city declined to approve, and the state government approved it against our wishes. We've been left with the problem. It's a one-way in and a one-way out. It has an extreme fire hazard, and I just want to remind Councillor Johnson about his comment last night. All his projects go over budget, so this is not that much to deal with. Thank you.
Is anyone for the motion? For the motion? Is there any councillor against the motion? Against? Councillor McCulloch?
Thank you, Mayor. There are a lot of hells in Councillor Catalano's debate. I can tell you that it would be hell on earth if a fire ravaged that community, and there would be hell to pay if we didn't have that secondary access road. I think that money is far better spent on a greater number of ratepayers. Councillor Bowman has already addressed what price you put on a life. Fire risk, yes, making places safer, as Councillor Johnson mentioned. Bushfire evacuation plans are essential, but a secondary access road is absolutely essential in this community, one of our communities across one of our wards. Our, as in 15 councillors elected to the whole of the City of Swan. Councillors, I was very close by helping man a water truck providing water to fire tankers during the Wirraloo fires. Yes, the fire didn't reach Shady Hills, as Councillor Johnson reminded us, but it sat at the bottom of the hill like a menacing demon. The photos from a female volunteer firefighter that night showing those flames licking the bottom of that hill were horrific. I put out a prayer on Facebook that night. Within a couple of hours, there were 16,000 reaches, comments, and amens to that. Yes, 400,000 litres of fire retardant assisted saving Shady Hills that night, but a secondary access road could well help save them if, God forbid, we have another fire through there. You've got your officer comment that details all the practical, logical reasons why this project is going ahead. And also the fact that the loan funding used to fund this project, as the contributions are to be recovered from the landowners, will factor in the loan and interest costs being incurred and not require the ratepayers to pre-fund these works up front through the use of municipal funds. Councillors, I'm just going to take a breath now, sit down and encourage you to not support this motion.
Are there any councillors for the motion? Are there any councillors against the motion? Councillor Henderson.
I'll try and be short, Mayor. Why is this project being built? Because there's a serious fire risk on that hill. It is a very serious fire risk, and it's been well enunciated. So, if you recall the last state election, I forced, as a candidate for Swan Hills, the state to commit to some funding for this project and give them their due. They followed through and they committed. And so this gave us the opportunity to get on and actually build this road, which we do desperately need. What is a life worth has been said. I'd just like to refer to a paragraph here from the officer's comment. Further funding is being sought from the state government by the CEO. Now, however, this provision is required in the instance that this is unsuccessful. Well, I suggest you get on the phone and talk to your local member and say, hey, put some money into this so it can be finished. That'd be real nice, wouldn't it, councillors? I think we've all got a bit of sway, haven't we? Well, I don't have any sway with Jess, but that's another story. The point I want to make is that this project has progressed. It's been well said about how it's going to be funded. This is a provision. It's absolutely essential that we get on with this and make it happen. Thank you.
Are there any councillors for the motion? If there's no further, I'll enter debate. I'll hand the chair to to Deputy Mayor Johnson.
Go ahead, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, councillors. We could spend quite a few hours talking about this subject, but in its briefest form, I cannot support this motion. Being a Pierce Ward councillor for the last 4 years and other elected councillors in the room, you can only know your own ward the best. And although I don't live in that particular ward, we've seen the devastation of the bushfires, and particularly over the Christmas period, although I was away, living on edge, hoping and praying that there was no bushfire while I was away, because I'd stepped away for that short period of time, every day checking the news, every day checking the weather, praying that nothing happened while I was away. Goodness forbid that everyone else would have to deal with it here, let alone those residents who have to deal with that period of the year where their lives are at stake. We are responsible. We are their ward councillors. We are their council. I am astounded that this has made it this far. This would happen in any of our other wards. We would protect our wards with everything that we had. This is the minimum standard that we can provide to them. Minimum. I'm sure we can do a whole lot more. And I would hope that other councils would see that in other wards and also support those residents, that we wouldn't even consider not going through with this project, and particularly turning back funding, state funding. I mean, why wouldn't we make it safe for our residents is just a question I can't even consider right now. So I'd just like to say that I cannot support this motion. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Catalani, your right of reply.
Thank you. Price of life. I mean, there's plenty of intersections where people have lost their lives because the intersections aren't up to scratch. I mean, you know, it's not just these people that are at risk, and that reflects the way we spend ratepayers' money. And it's not much to deal with. I think I heard that comment. Let me remind you, every $1 million that we spend is 1% on the rates bill. I didn't put anyone in danger up at Shady Hills. I'm afraid they chose to live there, and they're the risks that come with living in such an environment. You know, that's just the facts of it. I don't know how many others are in that same situation who live in the hills, who have that kind of risk but don't have that kind of advocacy behind ensuring that their existence up there is completely risk-free in terms of fire as well. I don't know, because I only just hear about Shady Hills. There's probably a lot of people up there that face the same risks year in, year out. But it's not just about fire. As I say, people have died at intersections that need work done on them. So I don't know what you mean by ward accounting. Sorry, I just don't get it. In fact, I think this might be an example of ward accounting. I'm talking about, you know, ratepayers right across the whole of the city of Swan. So, you know, it's a lot of money. It's actually a third of the cost of the refurbishment at Swan Active Midland, which is a lot of money, but just think of how many people benefit from that. It is actually utilitarianism, and if you don't understand what that means, then look it up, and that's just how we do run our economies, I'm afraid. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Catalano. Right, I'll put that to the vote. All those councillors in favour of Councillor Catalano's motion, please raise your hand. We have Deputy Mayor Johnson, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Knight and Councillor Howlett. And all those against? Councillor Singh, Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Zanino, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Brodovnik and myself. The motion is lost, 5 to 10. It was a 10. Thank you. So, Councillor Bowman, you foreshadowed the officer's recommendation,
I did, Madam Mayor.
and I'll ask for a seconder. Councillor Jones, would you like to speak to the alternate motion? Oh, it's already done. Is anyone against? Yes, I am. Councillor Catalano, do you wish to debate it? Okay. There's no one against. Put it straight to the vote. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation: Councillor Singh, Councillor Ringo, Councillor Bowman, Councillor Jones, Councillor McCulloch, Councillor Miles, Councillor Zanino, sorry, Councillor Henderson, Councillor Brodovnik and myself. And those against: Deputy Mayor Johnson, Councillor Catalano, Councillor Dawn, Councillor Knight and Councillor Howlett. So the motion's carried. 7-5? 10-5, sorry, 10-5. Thank you very much. So let's move on now to section 15, motions of which previous notice has been given. We have Councillor Brodovnik, she has a revocation motion, and that would be Councillor Knight has proposed the introduction of vacant land rating categories in 2024 and 25. Section 16, notice of motions for consideration at the following meeting if given during the meeting. The deadline for submissions will be 5 p.m. on Monday, the 18th March 2024. And I declare the meeting closed at 8:02 p.m. Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone in the gallery who came this evening.